Hi everyone, Cindy Turner here, and I'm hosting a 40-week feature of fabulous women doing amazing things in the world. And there is no one more worthy than the lady that I have with me today, Nicky. Nicky and I met a couple of months ago at a networking function, and I was really blown away by the work that she's doing in the world, over in Cambodia particularly, but based in the Sunshine Coast in Queensland. She is the co-founder and managing director of Free to Shine, a child protection organization that prevents girls from being exploited or trafficked into the commercial sex industry in Cambodia. Free to Shine is a registered Australian charity that is based here in the Sunshine Coast in Australia, but primarily about a third of the year you're spending in Cambodia. Is that right?
Yeah.
Great. So welcome today, Nicky. I'm super excited to be having this conversation with you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great. So I read that Free to Shine was formed in 2009. I'd love to hear a little bit about how that came to be.
Yeah, okay. So I guess it sort of goes back to before 2009. 2009 is when I took my first trip over to Cambodia. But whenever I start in 2009, people still ask why. Why did I go in 2009? So to rewind and give that context, I always loved school, but I never really read until my teacher told my mum when I was 11 that I had to start reading for 20 minutes a day. So I began, I guess, this love of books, which started in particular with the Choose Your Own Adventure book. So I really, really enjoyed that series of books where you got to choose what happened and then at the end of the book go back and reread the whole adventure, having all these different adventures based on what would have happened if you'd have actually decided something different in that moment. So I love the ones like where you're in a motorbike race, for example, and the boy in front is not too far ahead of you and you can see the next corner coming up and then the boy behind you crashes his motorbike. There's nobody around to help. What do? Turn to page 82 if you carry on going and leave the race steward to come and get him. Turn to page 107 if you drop out of the race to help him. So I was reading all these kinds of books and figuring out, like, I guess learning at the age of 11 that the way life can pan out can depend on the choices that you make. And I guess that taught me that the choices that we make are important. From reading those books, I went on to read the books in my school library, local library, the next library. I think I read through about 5 different libraries, so that by the time I was a teenager, I was reading books like A Woman in Her Own Right by Anne Dixon and Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffers. And then after that, in my very early 20s, I was reading books about women and girls and their plights around the world. So different challenges and difficulties and exploitation and in different countries. So from Mukhtar in Pakistan, who was sentenced to a public gang rape as a punishment for a crime that her brother allegedly committed, to Nujud, who was 10 years old and walked into a courtroom in Yemen and requested that they helped her get divorced. And so I would feel massively upset about the things that were happening to women and girls around the world. Mm-hmm. I'd want to help, but I never knew how to help. So I'd put the book back on my bookcase and I'd go about my life as normal. 6 months later, I'd pick up another book, I'd read that, I'd feel all these feelings again, learn about a different issue in a different country, and then I'd just go about my life again for 6 months because I didn't know what to do. And then one day I walked past my bookcase and I just saw this long line of books and I just looked at them and I thought, at what point should I stop reading these if I'm not going to take action? Or at what point do I actually take some action? Even if I don't know what action to take, what do I do? So in that moment, I made a promise that the next book I read, no matter what the issue or what the country, that I would do something. And a number of months later, the next book I read was about sex trafficking in Cambodia. And so that's when I realized, like, I'm going to be doing something about sex trafficking in Cambodia. That's that promise I made. So that's why in 2009, I booked a flight to Cambodia to go and learn more about it. I'd read a book about it, I'd got some examples and some theory about it, but I wanted to know, what could I do? I would have done anything. So I took 4 weeks out of work and I went to volunteer with a group of survivors. And that's when my life changed.
So tell us a bit about that. What did you discover? What did you experience? What did you see in that month?
A lot. I discovered that they are the strongest women I had ever known. Mm-hmm. I learned that I would do anything for them. By the time I'd spent a month with them, I would have done anything for them. My background is in psychology and teaching and life coaching. And so the role that I'd been asked to do while I was over there was to write a life skills curriculum for them to prevent them being re-trafficked once they were reintegrated back into unstable families and communities. So I was getting to know them and learning what their learning styles were and what gaps they had in their knowledge that they needed so that I could write this life skills curriculum. But by the time I'd spent that time with them, I would have done anything for them, way beyond that. I learned that beyond the rapes was the torture. So the kind of torture that they had experienced would include things like being forced to drink a man's urine, having chili stuffed into their vagina, having a hot metal rod jammed inside of them. Sina, for example, was 13 when she was trafficked, and she was kept in a large cupboard in a nice hotel and brought out when men paid to have sex with her. And one day a man complained that she didn't smile. And as a punishment, to teach her to smile in future, as a punishment, she was stripped naked and locked in a coffin for 2 days. And she says the only thing that stopped the ants from going into her eyes were her tears. But after that, she smiled every time a customer raped her. So for me, it was learning things like that, meeting the girls and young women that had happened to, and seeing, despite the pain and trauma they were overcoming and working really hard to overcome, they still had this amazing strength and joy, a different approach to life. And I would have done anything for them. So at the end, when I was leaving, I said I was going to return to the Sunshine Coast and find a group of people who would help me to help them. But I hadn't lived their life and I didn't really know, I can guess, but I didn't know what they wanted and needed. And so I asked them, what do you want? What do you need? And I guess when I look back, I expected an easier answer than what I got. I expected they would need something like sewing patterns to help them do their tailoring to make an income or whatever. And I don't know anything about sewing, but I'd be able to figure out how to find them some sewing patterns or something. Like what they said to me, I had never realized. Like now I think, how did I not know that back in 2009? But I didn't. And so what they said was, Nicky, when we got rescued, the traffickers didn't go without a girl. They just went out into a rural village and took a new young girl to replace us. So go out into the rural villages, find the girls who aren't in school and get them into school, because if they were in school, they wouldn't get trafficked. And I looked around the room and they were all shaking their head. Not one of them had been in school when they were trafficked. And the international research backs that up. The United Nations International Labour Organization also talks about getting children into school being a vital part of keeping them safe from being trafficked. So that's what we had to figure out how to do.
Mm-hmm. So is that the main focus of Free to Shine then, is to help educate these girls?
The main focus is to keep school-age girls safe so that they don't get trafficked. And the way of doing that is primarily through getting them into school, because if they're physically in school, they're not being targeted by traffickers while they're sitting at home in the day. But they're also under the watchful eye of a professional. So someone who knows to tell somebody if a child goes missing. So it is about getting them educated because of the opportunities and the choices that having an education gives to somebody. But the biggest reason for it is to keep them safe.
Awesome. So let's just talk about a few stats for a moment. So how many people worldwide roughly would you say are enslaved in the moment?
So that's a really, really difficult one to say because a lot of it goes unreported because of the stigma of telling people. So a lot does go unreported, but the best, most comprehensive figures that we can get from like recently for the last couple of years is that if you look at sex trafficking, you look at forced commercial sexual exploitation, there's currently 4.8 million globally.
That is incredible. And which countries are most prevalent for sex trafficking?
So a really good resource for people to take a look at is the TIP report. It's called the Trafficking in Persons report, and it gets published every June, and it goes through about 161 different countries and looks at whether it's a source country, a transit country or a destination country. And it also looks at what's being done for prevention, aftercare, rescue, and whether a government is doing everything that they ought to be doing or not, and then ranks them accordingly. So that's a really good resource for people to look at because obviously it changes from year to year. But Cambodia, for example, for percentage of population living in slavery, so not necessarily sex slavery, but percentage of population living in slavery, Cambodia ranks ninth highest in the world.
And what are some of the countries that would be even higher than that?
So the other countries are North Korea, Eritrea, Burundi, the Central African Republic, Afghanistan, Mauritania, South Sudan, Pakistan, and Iran.
So of the 4.8 million people that may be enslaved, and who knows, it may be even higher than that, is it mostly girls or are there boys? Like, is it gender specific?
So if we look at enslaved in sex slavery, yes, there are men and boys that are enslaved, but more than 99.4% are women and girls.
Wow.
And of that, 21.3% are children.
So it affects women as well. So they may be actually an adult.
Yeah, young adults, and it can be that they were children when they were taken in and young adults by the time they're rescued. So
in most cases, they're actually rescued to be removed from that situation, or do they escape?
Both. It is both. They either escape or actually be freed. And sometimes if they are getting older and they've been there a long time, then brothels and traffickers will actually allow a regular client to purchase them out because they would rather take a younger, new person in.
Fresh blood. This work must be so confronting for you at times to be witness to some of the horrific things that are going on. Do you find it challenging or do you find it rewarding, or is it both?
Both. Yeah, both. It's incredibly challenging. It's hard to even pinpoint the challenges because the challenges are just daily, thick and fast, constant. It's been 10 years now. So massive amounts of challenges. But yes, there are a lot of rewards at the same time. And I guess that's where coaching comes in as a useful tool for me, that we reflect on the challenges and we address the challenges and the difficulties. But then where we can, we focus on the positives and the successes, because I guess that's what gives you the energy and the optimism to drive you forward. I think if you got bogged down in all of the issues, you probably wouldn't move very far. It would be a little bit like wading through mud, wouldn't it?
So if you've had your organization now for 10 years and if you were to take pause and reflect on those first 10 years, what would you say has been the most rewarding thing, or the thing that you're most proud of that you've achieved in that 10 years?
Yeah, I don't think I could put my finger on one thing, but every time I would think of that, it would come down to examples of what girls on our program have done and achieved. So where there are girls living in situations of extreme poverty with all kinds of issues in their community, sometimes in their family, and yet with a lot less than what we have, they are doing more for other people than what we even think is possible. So, for example, Net, who had been on our program for about 6 months when her father died in a really tragic road accident, really big road accident. And Net was about 13 and had 4 younger brothers and sisters, and her mum was 7 months pregnant. So not only did they lose dad and husband, but they also lost the only source of income that they had, which put them into even more crisis at that point. They were already struggling, hence why she was on our program in the first place. And we put in a little bit of additional crisis support at that time to help Net stay in school. If that had have been me, I would have been so consumed in my own grief and trauma and trying to get me okay. And instead, whilst Net was dealing with all of that, she asked us for a whiteboard and pens because she said, I'm grade 6, so I know things. And so I can teach those things to grade 3s and 4s so that they don't drop out of school. And so she began teaching small classes to her neighbours in Khmer literacy and basic maths, just so those other kids could stay in school. Because Cambodia, for example, school is technically free, but it's really only for half a day. So to cover the whole curriculum, in order to pass your exams at the end of each year, to cover the whole curriculum, you've really got to go for more than half of the day. And so those extra classes outside of the half of the day that is free, those classes are really quite expensive. And so that's the reason a lot of children end up dropping out of school, is because they can't afford those extra classes, and so they don't pass their end of year exams, and therefore they don't get to progress on to the next grade. So to have 13-year-old children who are dealing with their own grief, doing things for their community. You know, we had one girl, for example, who was really talented as an artist, and she asked us if we would sell her artwork in Australia. And that, it's not that sort of caught my attention. It was what she wanted to do with that. She wanted to use 50% to provide her own additional classes so that Frida Shine didn't have to pay for her, so that she could be self-sufficient. And she wanted to use the other 50% of her income to enroll other girls living in poverty so that they could be safe. Yeah, so they're the things. Like, I've got lots of different examples of things where girls are doing things for themselves, for their families, and for the communities. That's, I think, what inspires and drives me, and what we consider to be the successes and the achievements.
Super awesome. That's amazing. Nicky, I'm curious, can you see a day when sex trafficking completely stops, that it's just a non-issue?
I can. And I think that includes having to achieve that. We need to take it more seriously than we do. So at the moment, it's not talked about. It's often not known about. I didn't know about it until just over 10 years ago. You mentioned that you didn't know too much about it before. I think it takes people knowing about it and then taking action on it. So the profits are enormous. So sex trafficking is an enormous profitable business. Again, the figures are really difficult to know, but it's estimated that sex traffickers make $27.8 billion per year. And yet what the rest of the world contributes to combating it is less than 0.5% of that figure. So we're not going to see the end of it while they've got bigger reasons to do it, and we're not giving them bigger reasons to stop it. So I think that's one part of it, is that we've got to take a lot more action. And then I think it comes down to helping those who are most vulnerable, be that children, women, girls, to not be easily exploitable. So helping them achieve their basic human rights, so that they've got enough water, safe water to drink, they've got adequate shelter instead of lying on a platform outside, enough food to eat. And then I think it also, a big part of it is getting women into leadership. So I would love to see a world where women take on 50% of the leadership positions and roles. And I think that would really be a key part of ending trafficking as well.
Hear, hear. I would agree to that. And to your point, Nicky, as well, I mean, I think I've led a very fortunate life. You know, I feel very privileged. I grew up in Canada, now live in Australia, very much living by my own choices in my life. But for many girls and women, they don't actually have that luxury. And for me, it was a real eye-opener to watch the movie Whistleblower with Rachel Weisz in it. And for me, that was just inconceivable what women and girls are going through around the world. And as you say, it's nearly 5 million people that are affected by sex trafficking and victims of it. Like, they don't have a choice. They're stuck in it. They're enslaved. Which is so confronting to watch when, you know, I lead a very fortunate, luxurious life compared to many. So I think, to your point, you know, educating, and that's really why I wanted to have this conversation with you today. So if we can just start to get that message out to more and more people, particularly business people, because you were mentioning to me a bit of your funding model. Maybe you'd like to share a little bit about how Free to Shine does support people in Cambodia. How do you do that financially? How do you make your money?
Yeah, so approximately 30% of our income comes from individuals who either make donations or choose to actually sponsor a girl. And then 54% of our income comes from small business, which is really, really cool, because I think business leaders now more than ever are realizing that people have lost faith in waiting for governments to change the world, and that actually that power of creating the world that we want to live in, that a lot of that power lies with small business. And businesses are wanting to look at how they can support and address the sustainable development goals, etc. So yeah, we work with small businesses. We have 3 different types of partnership, for example, Level Up, Cornerstone and Visionary. And those partnerships, like, people think that you have to be really profitable before you can actually help, but you don't. You can actually just begin and build it into your daily business life. So the most inexpensive partnership, for example, begins at $20 a week. So it's affordable for businesses. And in return for that, we give them a toolkit of resources and quarterly email support to actually build team engagement and client engagement. So the research shows that employees now want more than just a job. They want a career, a community, and a cause. And that by being able to come together as a team behind a cause actually really increases the productivity and the what it is that team members are actually wanting. So that's a really cool way that businesses are getting on board and supporting, and then being able to demonstrate that to their clients about what specifically their partnership is doing to address which SDG, for example. But probably a reason as well that is really cool is it's really hard to just begin a conversation on sex trafficking with people. It's not your general dinner time conversation. So yeah, so you need a way to introduce it. If you want to get that out, you need a way. So the best way is to say, right, we're doing this, and then to show that support, not to show, hey, look, I'm really great, but as a conversation starter. So people can get a badge that goes on their website so that their customers and clients can see it begins a conversation, or they have a very small footer at the bottom of their email, which is a way that their clients can see what they're doing, what SDGs they're working towards. So I think that way, it's a really subtle but impactful way of having important conversations with people in your community.
Fabulous. And so let's say there's an individual or a business that wants to get involved, they want to donate or they want to support you in some way. How might they find you?
Oh, that's quite easy. So website, freetoshine.org. If they're a business, freetoshine.org/business. If they're interested in sponsorship, freetoshine.org/sponsor. Also on our website, some great resources for them to look at, like the actual impact that we've had would be to look at quarterly impact reports and also annual reports. And then another great way that people like to stay in touch is obviously social media. So Free to Shine's on Facebook, Instagram, etc. And that's obviously updated more regularly, so they get to see little snippets as they go. So yeah.
Fabulous. You've got a team of at least 20 people at this point, and I believe most of those people are in Cambodia, and you're based in Australia some of the year.
That's correct.
Yeah. So the other thing I believe too is that you've got a book underway and it's coming out early next year. Tell us a bit about that.
Okay, so the book is called Do What Matters, and I guess it's a call to action for people to do what matters most to them. So this is what I determined mattered most to me. But the book is really to inspire people to do what matters most to them, do what matters most in your business, do what matters most in your family, do what matters most in your life and in the world. And what I do in that book is share lessons that I have learned in the decade that I've been doing this. So when I began, it appeared to me that it was us over here in Australia and now beyond Australia that were donating money and providing education to those living in Cambodia. But what I very quickly learned is that if you think that, you're missing half the story and half the goal, because it's what they have to teach us that I think is so incredibly powerful. There's so much that we can learn from them. So for those people who don't want to go and spend a decade working in Cambodia, I've taken the lessons that girls and their families and staff and different people in the community have taught me, things I've learned from them, and popped it all in the book. So that is actually going to be released on the 24th of January.
Well, that's super exciting. I can't wait to get my hands on that book. And we will do another feature for you when that book is off the press. So that'll be super awesome.
Cool. Thank you.
Nicky, you are an absolute inspiration to women, you know, leading change in the world. So I thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure.
Very welcome. Thank you so much for having me.